Meditation and Spiritual Practice. I'm Rabbi K'vod Weeder. This is a program of Temple Bethel of South Orange County, and if you're tuning in virtually, we're really happy to have you. And we'll begin. So, there's an amazing comment by the Hasidic master Menachem Nachum of Chernobyl, also known as Me'or Einayim, as Me'or Einayim means the light of the eyes, and sometimes the Hasidic masters are kind of named or nicknamed according to their books. So that is one of his main books of Torah commentary. And we're in our Torah portion. I know a lot of us are getting ready in our holiday cycle for Passover, just a couple of weeks. I'm very aware of it. But in our Torah cycle, we have just finished the book of Exodus. We've just finished the culmination of this whole liberation story, and it really ends with the building of the Mishkan, of the Tabernacle, of the sanctuary. And one of the prime comments that Rashi makes, and a lot of the spiritual masters take off on, is when God says, "Va'asuli mikdash shachanti betocham," make me a sanctuary, so I shall dwell within them. They make a real big deal out of pointing out that it says betocham, that I will dwell within them, not make me a sanctuary so that I will dwell within it. Which is a lot of what we would think with language, is that we create this holy building, the sacred space, so that God will dwell within it. And the real big deal is to say, no, that's not what building sacred space is about. It's not about the space. It's about us, and it's about God's presence, us not only dwelling within us, but I think it'd be more accurate to even say for us to wake up to God's presence that already dwells within us. And when we build that sanctuary, that whatever that is a way of waking up to God's presence. Now, the master, the Me'or Einayim, says, all of the things that God did for Israel, the liberation of Egypt from slavery to freedom, the giving the mitzvah of Passover and of circumcision, the journey of to Mount Sinai and the revelation of Torah, the accompanying the Israelites from a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, all of these things leading up to the building of the Mishkan, all of that was for the purpose of the opening verse in this week's Parsha, the beginning of Leviticus. The beginning of Leviticus and the opening of this week's Parsha is that God calls to Moses from the sanctuary. Vayikra, and God called. And that really this experience of being called, of being able to hear and know and experience this source of presence, of life that is with us all the time, but that is calling to us in a new way, in a new moment, that everything that went in the story up until this point, the liberation of Egypt, everything I just rattled off, was only happened for this moment, for God to call to Moses. Everything was all about this. And the Me'or Einayim says that this can be likened to a person who's sitting in total darkness. Total darkness. That if all of a sudden you were in total darkness for most of your life, in a cave or whatever, and suddenly the blinds were thrown open and you went outside, it would be blinding. It would hurt your eyes. There would be no way that you could handle it. So instead, a little bit of light is let in, just a little bit. And then maybe that opening is made a little bit more, and we give time for our eyes to adjust and to happen until we can finally make it outside and be in the light. And that's really kind of what is being commented to on the number one, on the story, that everything, that the reason why and God called to Moses is right in the middle of the Torah, right at the beginning of the middle book, the third book, right in the center. The reason why it's right in the center is because everything needed to happen. It's kind of like a letting in of more and more and more and more light until that calling could be present. And so this is really likened to our own story, that there is in every moment the incredible potential for that call. And when I want to say that call, any kind of idea or image that we have of that being looking a certain way, like a voice, or it's not about that. It's not about that. That's just an image of our mind that comes from Charlton Heston and the Ten Commandments, and all that great mythological story depiction of this calling. But that every moment has this moment of opportunity for revelation, that God's calling is a way of having what is deeper and what is hidden to be shown to us and to be revealed. And it's going to happen in its own way, and never how we expect. So the teaching is that everything that has happened in our lives up until this moment, everything from the big, the small, the heartache, the joyous times, the mundane, the sublime, everything has only happened to bring us to the possibility for the calling of this moment. And if we can really bring to this moment that sense of purpose, that sense of I'm everything's happened to bring me here, and I'm ready, in the same way that an athlete, for the Olympics or something, has trained and trained and trained and trained for their moment, and everything has happened and it all is about this moment. That is our potential in this moment. Is to bring that same kind of openness, willingness to connect, trust that our path has been just perfect to lead us to where we need to be right now. And that's the kind of intention that we want to bring into our avodah, our sacred service this morning. So go ahead and find a comfortable place to sit. Place that you can sit without too much adjustment. And we'll start with a nigun, a melody. You can just begin by becoming aware of your body in space, your bottom on the seat, the place where your feet meet the ground, the length of legs from your hips to your feet, the distance between the bottom of your spine and the top of your head, the way your arms hang out of your shoulders and the resting place of your hands. Notice the air as it enters into your nostrils or your mouth. Paying attention to the way the chest and the belly gently expand to make room for the inhale. And then noticing the movement of breath on the exhale. Noticing the contraction as the air leaves the body. Following again for another cycle of breath, noticing the gentle expansion with the inhale, soft belly, and the switching point, the turning point of the inhale to the exhale. And noticing the body's gentle contraction as the air leaves. This moment, never before. Never before have our cells been just as they are in our bodies. Never before has our awareness penetrated this particular moment with its breath, with its body sensation, with the sounds that are present in our awareness inside our house or outside. Never before has this particular thought arose in our mind with just its own flavor of today. Let yourself be totally open to this moment. You can notice your heart area space. You can imagine that your breath moves in and out of that heart area space to embrace, to say yes to every part of this moment, to say, yes, my whole life has happened to bring me here and now. This is the moment. And let that sense of opportunity fuel our openness to everything that's here: breath, body, not some picture of some imagined desire, but a full opening and greeting and welcoming of this moment. That in this moment, God calls to us through every cell, through every aspect of our experience: body sensation, breath, thought. God calls. God calls, I am holy. I am holy. I am the one who takes you out of the narrow places. I am the only one. Stay present with breath and body, with all the aspects of this moment. Heart open, embracing, and opening to the call that comes from every part of our experience, every aspect of this moment, that call that is saying, I am holy. And it's not words that have to be imagined in the mind, but really it's an openness to the depth, to the sacredness, to the presence that fills every part of this moment. It's a willingness to say, it doesn't end here. That this moment, this presence is Ein Sof, without end. And what we're practicing is a willingness to open to that presence without end. A willingness to not be satisfied with the labels that our own minds give to reality, to this moment, but instead to even notice that the label generating process is also filled with that divine presence and that infinite source. So I'll be quiet now. And let us practice opening, awakening, and recognizing the infinite depth of this moment. Dai, 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 dai. Dai, 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 dai. Dai, 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 dai. Dai, 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 dai. Dai, 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 dai. Dai, 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 dai. Dai, 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 dai. Dai, 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 dai. Dai, 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 dai. Welcome back, everyone. Any comments or questions? Anything, was it helpful to really think about in our lives, preparing for this moment? Really, we can talk about that as a moment, obviously, but what kind of attention or presence do we bring when we have a sense of purpose and meaning of our lives over time?
I have a question.
Yeah. Hi, Marla.
Hi, nice to see you. I put it in the chat privately to you when you were talking before the meditation. You know, when you're saying everything, all the negative and the positive in our lives have led us to this very moment. I'm just wondering, you know, I always wrestle with this because I do feel called to do certain work, and I do feel that certain experiences that were awful ended up bringing a lot of meaning to my life. But I don't like thinking that everything's fated or everything happens for a reason. I don't feel that I feel like I think the Harold Kushner book is more like, you know, God weeps with us when we, you know, doesn't cause childhood cancer or, you know, other things that are just horrible, um, uh, other circumstances. So I always wrestle with that. So I'm wondering what you have to say about that.
No, I appreciate you bringing that. It's really, I think, the challenge with the thought that everything happens for a reason is it's really up to each one of us to interpret the narrative of our lives of what that reason is. And you know what we find, at least in the tradition of Torah, you know, we have this incredible tradition of interpretation. Like, let's just take the story itself, you know, and the midrashim, the interpretations that have lasted over hundreds and thousands of years, the ones that are the ones that continue to inspire. They're the ones that continue to draw us closer. Is that what the Torah actually meant? You know, from the original, you know, the original intention of whoever it was, Moses, the later scholars, whatever that actually wrote down the Torah, that it was the actual intention, what you know, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, you know, said in the 2nd century with that midrash? Well, it's hard to say, but I think that whenever we start to get into things happening for a reason, the question is whose reason, what reason, and do the interpretations or our reasons for whatever it is that unfold in our life, what does that do for our sense of connectedness in life? So it's almost like it's not that giving a reason for something is descriptive, let's say, but maybe the way that we draw reasons for things can be prescriptive, meaning that they can be actually something that can orient us towards the next moment. How can we interpret the events in our lives in a way that orients us to the next moment in the most open-hearted, full, present way? Now, what's interesting about the teaching that we did about from the Me'orei Naim at the beginning was he wasn't saying that everything has a reason. He was saying that all of the things that happened in the Exodus needed to happen in order for Moses to be able to hear God's call at the beginning of this parsha. And the example he uses is being in a dark room and having, you can't just suddenly pull the shades out when you've been in dark, you'll be blinded. So it's kind of like, letting the light gradually. And so when I think about that as far as our lives, is one of the things is to say is everything in our life has happened in order to prepare us to be here and now. So it's really kind of an acknowledgement of growth, right? That we are growing, and that we might have difficult things that have happened in our lives, but those difficult things and how we relate to them, orient them, all of those things, if we're understanding that they've been part of our growth journey, then that can be a way to understand how it prepares us for this moment. Thank you. That's great. Great question.
Oh, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Dennis has his hand raised
Yeah,
too.
so let's go Dennis and then Maury. Go ahead.
Mine is a language problem.
Yes.
Not unusual. So 2 statements, make me a tabernacle or make a tabernacle for me. They just lead to such amazingly different conclusions. So how does, I guess you have to take the literal word. It wasn't written the way second choice. The ambiguity of the language drives me crazy. And I think that's a lot of what, if I pay attention to you, that's a lot of what the rabbis who interpret the Torah have to deal with, is the ambiguity of our language.
So take that with the make me a tabernacle or make for me a tabernacle.
Yeah.
Take both of those directions in the language of interpretations of it, and what do to you, Dennis, what do each one of those imply?
Okay, so let's do the second one because that's easy. Make a tabernacle for me. That's an object that's differentiated from the 2 people who are talking. Let's say it's God and Moses, and God is saying to Moses, make a tabernacle for me. It's like a third-party object. Make me a tabernacle is the same. It's the same problem I have with the Psalms. Be still and know that I am God. Is knowing that I'm God, meaning a third party out there, that God, or God is in me and I am God. The same kind of ambiguity. I don't know how to really interpret the first one as like, make me a tabernacle. How does Moses do that? The second one is so much easier for me to understand.
Right. How does Moses make God a tabernacle? Right. That's what your question is. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Now, that's very interesting. I mean, I think we could, already there's a couple of, drash or interpretation in my mind of ways to deal with that. But when I think about the language itself, Asul Mikdash, which is li, is for me. It's for me, it's possessive. So it's make for me a tabernacle.
That's easier for me.
Right. And so I'm just saying that I think the language yields itself is more direct to say, make this for me. And that's the intention. Now, if we wanted to go the other way, which I think is going against the language a little bit, but again, we do that all the time in Torah and all of that, is maybe part of that is to say, God is saying, you might have this idea of me as a concept, as a word, as something that's very abstract.
Yes.
But what I'm asking for you to do is make me something that is, make me for you into something that is, that's a sacred place for you. Make me into something that's real, that's holy, that's not just
it's a physical thing. It's not a mental thing, it's a physical thing.
Well, I'm suggesting that maybe one way of interpreting the way that you were saying, God saying to Moses, make me a tabernacle, is God saying, you may have this idea of me as a concept, as something that's abstract, that's an idea. I want you to make me a living reality, whether that is an actual physical space, or whether it's something that's more mental, spiritual. I want you to, anything that you conceive of as holiness, as depth, I want that to be about who I am for you. Just another way to go.
Yeah, I love that. What the rabbis do with the language is just fantastic.
Yeah, yes, I agree. Maury.
Oh, I was thinking about the journey to, I guess, inner peace. It's a journey in time. It's a journey, I feel like, not a struggle, but the journey, if we're finding, or if I'm finding inner peace, then that is what helps me to do good things for others, but also doing good things is a path to inner peace. I mean, I kind of, I look at both ways of, I relate that somehow to what you were talking about, to this journey or this moment in time, but this journey that I struggle with, the journey to finding inner peace, but also realizing that doing things that are good for the world, good for others, that is also the journey to inner peace. I don't know if
Yes. No, absolutely, Maury, and absolutely. I think it's important to recognize, and it's really, I think it has everything to do with who you are in that doing good things, right? So, or where that is motivated, because for sure, mitzvot that are physical action of doing for others has the ability, just through the action, to reinforce an awareness of connection, that you and I are not separate, that we are one. And when I act on that in some way, I reinforce that reality, that belief, that awareness. And that is, one can say, what is inner peace? Well, in Hebrew, the word shalom, peace, does not mean tranquility. It doesn't necessarily mean, it's like I'm floating in a spa, right now. But shalom is really about completeness, about wholeness, that I feel whole. I have a sense of connectedness to the world and those around me. And for sure, doing action in the world, social action on any of those realms is something that reinforces shalom. Now, I want to differentiate, because there is a lot of things that can be about social action or social justice that do not reinforce wholeness or shalom. Meaning that, if I have a very strong us and them awareness about whatever's going on in the world, and I'm needing to fight against them, then those actions that I'm doing is as noble or righteous or whatever the cause is that I think it is really in service of that separation. Now, I may rationalize in my own mind that I'm doing it for the greater wholeness, the greater good, or the whatever, but as long as it's not the principles that or it's not values that I am fighting against or that I'm working against, but as long as it is people that I have separated myself from, and my action is about further cementing that separation, then this is where we see so much burnout in people who are so involved in social action and social justice, because it's not leading to that shalom and wholeness. It's just leading to more separation and division, and it gets exhausting. So I think that's the piece when we act and we move in the world through mitzvot, whether those are on just person to person, whether those are advocacy, political advocacy kinds of things, whatever it is, what's the consciousness? What is the wholeness that we're striving for, even within where we're acting? And, and that's where it connects to, as you're saying, Maury, our own inner peace.
Well, I really appreciate you putting it that way. I think that's very helpful.
Great.
Rabbi, if I can interject, I think.
Yes, please,
Well,
Audrey.
good morning, everyone. Good
Yeah,
morning.
morning.
I think you're saying balance. We need that balance in our lives, or I need that balance in my life, with service as well. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Yeah, and the balance is always I feel like at least balance for me is always a juggling piece. There's no, any image that we have of everything being, in perfect balance is, I kind of gave up on that a long time ago, but it's more about, some things take our attention, and how do we keep the kind of an even, back and forth of, three principles. And really, in the Mishnah and Pirkei Avot, I think they give us a nice vision of what this balance is. That they say, you may remember the song, Al Shlosha Devarim, Al Shlosha Devarim, Al Shlosha Devarim Ha'olam Omed. On three things the world stands. Al HaTorah, on Torah, Ve'al HaAvodah, on sacred service, Ve'al Gemilut Chasedim, and on acts of loving kindness. And really here we can look at Torah as being sacred study. It's, all those inputs that we give ourselves of wisdom from our tradition, wisdom from other traditions, whatever it is, but things that speak and help us focus and orient towards what's important. Then avodah, service. Now here I'm not talking about social service. Avodah is really worship. Right? It's spiritual practice, as in what we're doing here, meditation, prayer. For some people it can be singing, or it can be art, or whatever it is, but ways in which we practice who we want to be in a more contained environment, whatever we set up for ourselves. And then Gemilut Chasedim, acts of loving kindness. And that's what you were saying before, Maury, of how we are with the people around, how we interface with the world, what we do. And it's that balance, Audrey, like all those, making sure that all three of those things are present in our lives always. And sometimes we may give more attention to one and sometimes more attention to the other, but ultimately we want to make sure that all of those engines are firing. So Thank you,
Just a-
everybody, for a wonderful
Can I
morning.
ask just a quick question about avodah?
Yes, quickly,
The
yes.
word avodah doesn't mean work.
It does. It means work, but it comes from the word eved. Eved can mean a servant or a slave, but eved means a servant. So it's work, but it's work that has a sense of service to it. And so yes, you could interpret avodah, and certainly in Israel, more of a secular meaning of just work. This is your avodah, your work, but the way that it's spoken about by the rabbis religiously, especially in this Pirkei Avot piece, is sacred work or sacred service. The last thing I want to leave for you guys, just a couple quick announcements. One, Sarah put in the chat, there's a family Passover program tonight at 7. Just from 7 to 8, music, teaching. It will be a lovely way to start to prepare for Passover. If anybody has any questions about Passover, preparing for Passover, what it's like to do it in the pandemic, what it's like to do it with Shabbat being Erev Pesach, and some of the complications that does as far as chametz, as far as all of those, or even anything about the spiritual meaning of some parts of the Seder, please send me an email by this evening of whatever your questions are, and I'm going to be making a video that's going to address all of the questions that people have. So that will be available. So if you have any questions about Passover, put them in an email to me. And then finally, I want to say that that our mystical trip to Israel is looking very good. I know some of you here are already registered, and we will be having another info meeting that will be, I'll be sending out information about it. It's right now scheduled for Sunday morning, May 2nd. We already have 12 people registered, and we are going to cut it at, keep it closed at 20. Things are looking very good in Israel. Most of Israel right now is already vaccinated. So as far as life is much farther along as far as opening up than it is here. And I just hope in the meantime, everybody stays healthy and connected, and look forward to sharing Passover together. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.